There is a puzzle at the heart of Christianity and its relationship to the political life. In its earliest centuries, Christian leaders almost universally, for a variety of reasons, but almost universally, opposed violence of any kind. Yet for most of its history up till now, Christian leaders have also wrought upon the world immense and tumultuous violence. From the Crusades to the 30 Years' War, from much of chattel slavery to World War I, from global colonialism to America's nationalist imperialism and global extractionism. It's hard not to be cynical. It seems difficult to avoid Augustine's classic pessimistic division between the city of God, which is to come, and the city of man, in which we live and must make do as best we can with small improvements and significant compromises. Two things seem to be true. One, that the world will persist in its imperfection, that human nature is stuck. And so two, we can't expect ourselves or others to attain much higher ethical aims than some sort of constant compromise, some sort of perpetual lesser evil. Hence goes the argument that when Jesus tells Pilate at his trial that his own kingdom is not of this world, we must expect it in another. So how can one be resilient living under such pseudo-legitimacy, knowing that hope is postponed into some distant eternity? How does religion become anything else than precisely what Marx accused it of being when Karl Marx said that religion is but the opium of the people that keep them numbed and unable to act to change their condition. Political cynicism has a certain powerful gravity from your day-to-day experience to the voices online, leaving resiliency without muster, without aim on this side of the eschaton. In this presentation, I would like to look to the Anabaptist tradition to find two potentially helpful reflections on the topic of political resilience. So long enclaved from its early persecutions in the 1500s, Anabaptism, it reemerges in the 20th century in its increasingly interconnected world. Distinct in its opposition to infant baptism and a strict nonviolent ethic, Anabaptists were also traditionally known for their separation from the world, of oaths, of violence and government, to live what they believed to be an ethically pious life. Functionally, after two unique revolutionary failures, Anabaptism became a quietist movement, retreatist from the world, aiming only to perfect their own local community, believing that government inevitably involved coercion, violence, and anti-Christness. How can these isolationists, little interested in changing the world, be relevant to our problem of finding resilience to particularly political turmoil? They had, in a sense, abandoned politics. Anabaptists were united by a shared instinct that something had gone wrong when Constantine and Theodosius, the early Roman emperors in the 300s, finalized and legally tied Christianity to the Roman order, to this world's political economic order, and so corralled its moral horizons to whatever was good and necessary for the empire. Scholar of Anabaptism Walter Clausen writes, quote, "The identification of infant baptism as the motor of Constantinian Christendom explained that so-called Christians never consciously and willingly commit themselves with Christ in baptism to patience and to resist evil with the sword of truth. So how can they be expected to live that way? They cannot, since unless they have so committed themselves, they are citizens of and bound to use the rules, methods, and weapons of that realm which is outside the perfection of Christ and which is characterized by strife, unquote. And so, for these Anabaptists, there seem to be two paths. The world as instituted by Christ, and this world as it stood in opposition to Christ. This made for a strict bifurcation between Christ and the so-called worldly powers. As one of Anabaptism's most influential writers, Michael Sattler, wrote in the Schleitheim Confession in the 1520s, an exemplar of the more strict tradition of Anabaptism. Quote, "For truly all creatures are in but of two classes, the world and those who have come out of the world, and none can have part with the other." In this way, Anabaptists generally denied any true legitimacy to what Augustine called the city of man, and they cast suspicion on Thomistic natural law, that anything else could be revealed than what was revealed in Christ, that the world is not quite as a reliable testimony to God as the Sermon on the Mount. Yet in its 20th century resurgence, we do not find a quietist withdrawal and universal hostility. Rather, the leading voices of this revival was John Howard Yoder, who called Jesus a herald of liberation. Many followed in Yoder's wake and under new conditions of relating Anabaptism to the world. Now, these modern interpreters have brought out two treasures that are from their tradition that might encourage active resilience in a volatile age. First, Anabaptists offer a shrewd skepticism that we must indeed accept that this world and its organizing powers are so hopelessly broken that to imagine Christianizing it and becoming good citizens of that world is poisonous. Anabaptism's central critiques argued that the Protestant two kingdoms and the Catholic integralist positions had traded ultimate allegiance to Christ for worldly power here and now. We had secularized the church rather than sanctified the state. But here, these modern Anabaptists have begun to reimagine that this world does not mean the world, and perhaps the world can yet still find redemption. And so the second point of unique resilience is then optimism. That to start with temporal assumptions, that slavery can't be undone, that war is inevitable, or that greed is necessary to human exchanges, that's to not take the Our Father prayer seriously enough. The meaning of cruciform ethics in the shape of Christ's death, is nothing less than clarity that God's moral will really can be realized on earth as it is in heaven. So goes the prayer. Even if it takes following Christ to the point of death for testifying to this world that another way is possible. And so the unique Anabaptist orientation to Jesus' strategic morality of loving one's enemies or embracing communal ownership of property enters the world as a genuinely alternative option. Taken together, then, we're faced first with an acute cynicism, more pessimistic than Augustine about this world's corrupt power. And second, we're possessed by an intense hope, more optimistic than Aquinas about human capacity. Anabaptism offers a compelling contribution to political resilience toward a liberatory strategy. Yoder inspired this neo-Anabaptist resurgence in the mid-20th century by arguing that Jesus of Nazareth was now neither an apolitical figure nor a personal moralist, but rather the, quote, bearer of a new possibility of human, social, and therefore political relationships. With the weight of Jesus as a model and example, Yoder and others wanted to remind that Christ had been in the world to oppose what scholar Paul Burkhoff understood as the structures of power that transcend individual lives, that which the Apostle Paul termed principalities and powers. These powers were understood by Yoder to be created and ordered by God, but they had become, quote, so incorrigible that the most effective way to take responsibility is to refuse to collaborate
and by that refusal to take side in favor of the victim whom that power is oppression. This is not a withdrawal from society. It is rather a major negative intervention.
The powers themselves, the relationships of people under economic circumstances and systems, of political systems and circumstances, of any kind of social hierarchical organization in itself is not necessarily bad, but it has been incorrigibly corrupted. Those powers which shape our lives, which incentivize and constrain our individual action, which position our individual action in a wider social network of pressures and incentives. Yoder desires to draw a distinction between the sheer existence of the powers and how they ought to be refused. As a part of the world, they exist, the true world. But as a part of this world, as it is particularly and singularly ordered, they ought to be refused by Christ's all-consuming claim. Christ's kingdom, which is for Yoder the true world, was neither a retreat from or accommodation to this world and its political socio-economic orders, but constituted rather a challenge to those orders from precisely outside of their rulership, from an alien narrative of Christian community. Anabaptist theologians such as Jana Hunter Bowman proposes that Anabaptism can, quote, break the state's claim to ultimacy by recognizing it only as a dynamic process characterized by a threefold reality. This threefold reality she takes from Yoder. The power is good, the power is sinful, the power is redeemable. It is precisely when the powers of the state arrogate to themselves absolute authority that the state departs from divine intention and requires redemption. Her experience in Colombian peacebuilding directly informs her efforts as she observed their communities under duress, which had to engage with a non-responsive state, with an oppressive state, with a responsive state. This world is not a static world, she argues. Conditions of the powers are always shifting and moving, and they can be changed. Because regularity, system, and order are true goods. The power of regularity, the power of a system, the power of order is true goods. State-like structures are creative necessities, divinely ordained for the positive value in history of ordering human life together. But these powers have met incorrigible corruption. We don't know government in its creative capacity, she argues. Governments are no longer instruments that link creation to God's love and fellowship, she says. Yet they still make life intelligible. And so something that is indispensable for life tends to try to enslave human beings. We're met with a problem. The solution, though, is not for Hunter Bowman simply carving out incremental goods living in the impoverished city of man. Because the state is, quote, the site of multiple and permanently contested meanings that try to ground society without ever being able to do so. Here, then, the Anabaptist contribution appears by unseating the state from its place of dominance, its place of revelatory power assumed from Augustine to liberal Democrats. The state is not the central subject of history for Jana Hunter Bowman. This refusal to accept the state on its own terms rebuffs sectarian isolationism and Christendom integralisms, and rather, quote, recognizes each other as minorities amidst minorities and communicates with each other nonviolently, if agonistically but not antagonistically, in pursuit of the common welfare. Here, Hunter Bowman is critical of John Howard Yoder. The Messianic community, the Christian community that simply interrupts the present by the ethical eschatological invasion, but does not engage with the conditions of the powers, is able to give little account for how society can actually be changed by peace builders. Further, without accepting a theoretical good of the state to organize human living together, communal accountability like Yoder avoided when abusing women who worked under him would be impossible. That is, she argues the state can do good, but never on its own terms,
and certainly never in compromise to Christ's commands. The state is not an equally legitimate revelatory method of God. But thus far, in history, thus far, that's precisely what the state has demanded it be. Contribution 1. Radical pessimism. Where's the radical optimism? As already established, we cannot escape the world, for it's not apart from us. The entirety of humanity and the planet operates as one interwoven system whose actions and structures shape and form all else. Imperial structures shape its own citizens with what Lisa Tessman calls ordinary vices of domination, and inflict upon others indignities, sufferings, and cruel exploitations that form their lives. Precisely these outsiders, though, Yoder argues, were positioned to call the status quo into question because, quote, they were not politically committed to the maintenance of the existing system. And thus for Yoder, it's not the world, per se, which must be avoided, but rather this world, that is to say, a particular ordering and structuring of power. As Hunter Bowman notes, this world is their world, the world of the wayward and corrupted powers. It must not be abandoned, but nor ought it be accommodated, nor ought it be compromised with. The world must be disinvested from precisely as you commit to its redemption. Christian resilience emerges from this disinvestment, though being an alien, a sojourner, a terrorist to this world as it stands, in the name of resilience for the margins. In Yoder's words, quote, after Constantine, the ruler, and not the average person or the weak person, becomes the model for ethical deliberations. A moral statement on the rightness of truth-telling or the wrongness of killing is tested first by whether a ruler can meet such standards. Yoder, Hunter Bowman, and the Anabaptist tradition point to this as the fundamental reversal in ethics. The pretense that rulers can be ethically accommodated. Stanley Hauerwas, one of Yoder's premier inheritors, summarizes succinctly using the example of papal social encyclicals, which, he says, remain paradigmatic documents of a Constantinian church always wanting to mount social criticism while continuing to seem supportive of the powers that be. Taken as wholes, Protestant and Catholic both have shifted their ethics across history on issues like slavery or torture only after general social shifts, and rarely before, though there are plenty of exceptions, but in general, rarely before, when mere moderation was the normal suggestion on such issues. This is the opposite of standing outside of this world in the Anabaptist sense. It is to mistake what is bone cancer for an ache that can be treated with aspirin, of the aspirin of Augustine's acceptances in the City of Man. But this refusal to attempt to fully redeem the structural powers of human social life enables those structural problems to spread. The powers can't be redeemed by operating within the rule set and possibilities offered by those same social structures, those same social organizations, such as slavery or empire, but only within a trans-temporal, trans-spatial allegiance to a cruciform witness in perpetual homelessness from the sociological realities which source their meaning in something subaltimate. This is the Anabaptist claim. As written about Christians in the Epistle of Diognetus, quote, they share the life of citizens, they endure the lot of foreigners. Every foreign land is to them a homeland, and every homeland a foreign land. The powers will not be resolved either by using their own forceful violence
for this is not resilience. Resilience is found when one releases the insistence to be in charge and instead builds consensus and consent in an actively troublemaking way. A consent that is deeply important for these re-baptizers who love their voluntarism. Here, resilience must find its raison d'etre by operating beyond norms towards grassroots organization. Yet still, where is that optimism again? We've continued to be rather pessimistic about the unchanging horrors of the world as it stands. If the Anabaptist vision offers us a clarity about the nature of this world and its unplacatable powers, it also offers an optimism that these powers can be overcome, that genuine and significant good can be accomplished in this world, that it is not an endless compromising slog of lesser evils. This is demonstrated by the strict Anabaptist adherence to the ethics of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. The teachings of Christ regarding nonviolence or communal ownership, they can't appeal to the powers as they are this world. They can only challenge them, overcome them, and in doing so, bring them back to their abandoned, orderly nature, the way things ought to have been ordered from the start. Such an absurd utopian hope is not heroic naivete, expecting the perfect of imperfect people, but it is as necessary as breathing in a world of hopelessness. This vision, the belief that such a world is possible, generates the very conditions that make possible that which is hoped for. Only by hope can one inspire and organize people to make sacrifices together in specific, concrete, achievable steps toward hope's object. Hope emerges from outside of this world and the normal operation of the powers. Its ethics often appearing as strange and impossible because it is outside of the present imaginative capacity. Once upon a time, the main of Christendom affirmed the slave trade for centuries. Ethics, disembodied, resigned to what was necessary, and dreamt little of liberation, arguing instead about what kinds of slavery are justified and under what conditions may it be justified. But only the opposite mindset, or spirit set, could feed resilience. Utopian dreams kept the chattel slave alive as they stole education, refused the colonization of their minds, and dreamt of what escape to Canada could be like, even while under torture. It is dreaming of the best world possible, which is the start to realizing it. Not merely a better world, the best world. To pronounce ahead of time that the city of man will totally endure until eschatological divine intervention, it's anathema to the Anabaptist, who believes Christ enables humans to do together what seems impossibly heroic. For this reason, Jesus sought out those living on the margins as uniquely capable of true moral action, for they lived in a world that was not designed for them, but could, precisely by their outsider identity, challenge the standing powers. Aaron Dufault Hunter argues that this cruciform epistemology, where the cross itself is ultimately the ethical norm of what is possible, is the essential admittance of vulnerability. This vulnerability throws, quote, a wrench into the grinding monotony of coercion and suffocating disassociation, shame, and rage, unquote. By the communal trust that such action is meaningful in the long run, even if we can't see it now. This is truly a titanic struggle to insist that the world can be better, not just in bits and pieces, but on a fundamental level, that this world's powers are lost. They must be abolished. But the world's power, human being capacity to live, is redeemable. This is to be rightly cynical about power, but radically hopeful by grace. more pessimistic than Augustine, more optimistic than Aquinas. In sum, Anabaptism is developing. It's in a process. We're examining its current developments from a quietist monasticism into seeking to change this world in the 21st century. Two essential lessons mark this path. One, that there are few opiums more potent than that we must leave the beautiful to some future eschaton. This is Marx's indictment laid upon Constantinian Christendom, which kills hope and so also kills resilience in political struggle by a priori accepting the world as it has to be. Then comes point two, that to essentialize moral imperfection is to give up the battle before even the attempt, leading us to more easily accede to evil and compromise the good, because we don't really believe that it's possible. Alone, optimism and pessimism are, of course, not unique. All traditions of Christianity hold to the sinfulness of this world and to our obligation to yet still do good. What is unique to recent developments in Anabaptism, as I've argued here, is the confluence of both an ultra-pessimism, which argues this world must be torn up from the root out without compromise, and a super hope that insists we are all morally responsible to live what the Catholic tradition calls the life of supererogation. Jesus of Nazareth said that my kingdom is not of this world, that is, this world of Pilate, the world of hierarchical, ordered imperial power and domination. But, he continues, or should I say and, he continues. His kingdom has come, he says, from elsewhere. It's invaded the world. It's changing it from within. The kingdom of God is within you. The plurality. And so herein is captured all the pessimistic optimism of the Anabaptist.